Evergreen Manor nestled quietly on the outskirts of Willow Creek, a small suburb where the houses grew sparse and the nights stretched long under a canopy of ancient oaks. The facility was unremarkable from the road. Faded red brick walls, overgrown hedges that whispered in the wind, and a sign out front that promised compassionate care for every stage of life. But inside, it was a labyrinth of pastel corridors. The air thick with the sterile tang of antiseptic mixed with something sweeter, almost cloying, like overripe fruit. Residents shuffled in worn slippers, their robes hanging loose on frail frames, lost in the fog of memories that slipped away like sand through fingers. I'm Sam. I was a night shift nurse that worked there for 5 long years. The job paid the bills, and on good nights, it felt meaningful, helping the elderly navigate their twilight. But the East Wing, we avoided talking about it. The staff called it the Void Wing in hushed tones, a joke that wasn't funny anymore. It was isolated at the end of a hallway where the fluorescent lights flickered more often, and the heating vents hummed with an unnatural rhythm, like distant breathing. It all started subtly, the way these things do. Mrs. Harlan was the first, 92 years old. Her Alzheimer's so advanced, she often forgot her own name. I'd find her staring at the ceiling during rounds, her gnarled fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air. One night, as I adjusted her infusion bag under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, she grabbed my wrist with a grip that shouldn't have been possible for someone so frail. Her eyes, usually clouded and distant, sharpened like shards of glass. "They're watching again," she rasped, her voice a dry whisper that sent a chill down my spine. "The ones beyond the stars. They see us now because we can't see ourselves anymore." I forced a smile, the kind we nurses had perfected, reassuring, detached. "It's just a dream, Mrs. Harlan. Let's get you back to sleep." But as I pried her fingers loose, I felt it, a tremor in the air, like the room had exhaled. Dementia patients say wild things, I told myself. Hallucinations from misfiring neurons. That's all. A few days later, Mr. Ellis joined the chorus. He was 87, a former astronomer who'd spent his life peering through telescopes at distant galaxies. The disease had robbed him of that passion, leaving him mumbling about stars he could no longer name. One afternoon in the common room, I caught him scribbling furiously on a napkin with a stolen pen. The same symbol, over and over, a swirling vortex, ringed with countless eyes, staring out from the chaos. I sat beside him, trying to engage. "What's that, Mr. Ellis? A constellation?" He looked up, and for a moment, his gaze was piercing, lucid. "The plaque," he said slowly, tapping his temple. "It builds up in our brains like cosmic dust, erodes the barriers, the ones evolution built to protect us. When enough of the mind crumbles, you see what's really out there. The elder ones. They've always been watching, Sam, waiting for the veils to thin." I laughed it off, but his words lingered like a bad dream. That night, I researched it on my phone during break. Amyloid plaques, the hallmark of Alzheimer's. Sticky proteins clumping in the brain, disrupting signals. But barriers? Elder ones? It sounded like something from those old pulp horror stories I'd read as a kid. Soon, more residents echoed the madness. Old Mr. Petrov, a retired linguist from Eastern Europe, began muttering in tongues no one could identify. Not Russian, not Latin, something older, guttural, like stones grinding in the deep. He'd press his ear to the wall, nodding as if listening to a conversation just beyond hearing. They speak through the cracks, whispers from the void. They promise knowledge, but the price is your sanity. Then there was Mrs. Klein, once a school teacher, now confined to a wheelchair. She'd wake screaming in the small hours, clawing at the air. "Tentacles," she'd cry. "Tentacles brushing my thoughts, cold and endless from the dark between stars. The other nurses dismissed it as night terrors, upping her sedatives. But I saw the fear in her eyes, real, primal, not the confusion of dementia. The doctors, when I finally mentioned the patterns, chalked it up to shared delusions. Mass hysteria in a closed environment, Dr. Reynolds said during a staff meeting, adjusting his glasses. Vulnerable minds picking up on each other's fantasies, increase group activities, monitor interactions. They prescribed more meds, adjusted diets to reduce inflammation. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The affected residents were the worst cases, the ones whose brains were honeycombed with plaques and tangles, like Swiss cheese riddled with voids. It was as if the disease wasn't destroying them. It was revealing something. One stormy midnight, the power flickering from the lightning outside, I made my rounds in the void wing. The hallway felt longer than usual, the shadows pooling unnaturally in the corners. I found 10 of them gathered in the common room, not wandering, but arranged in a precise circle around a low coffee table. No lights on, just the pale glow from the emergency exits casting long, distorted silhouettes. Mrs. Harlan, Mr. Ellis, Petrov, Klein, and others, all awake, all staring at the same blank stretch of wall. My heart pounded as I approached. "Everyone okay? It's past bedtime." Mrs. Harlan turned her head slowly, her smile serene, almost pitying. "They're here now," she said calmly, as if announcing dinner. "The elder ones. They've waited eons for vessels like us, weak enough in body, open enough in mind. The plaques, they're not a curse, they're keys." I followed their collective gaze to the wall. At first, nothing but cracked paint and a faint water stain from last year's leak. Then, a subtle shift. The air thickened, humming with static. The wall rippled like the surface of a pond disturbed by an unseen stone. Impossible geometries unfolded in the shadows, angles that bent wrong, defying perspective. Vast entities coalesced beyond the veil, indifferent behemoths, older than stars, their forms a tangle of writhing limbs and unblinking orbs. They weren't invading, they were always there, peering through the thin fabric of reality. A wave of nausea hit me. My vision blurred, and for a split second, I felt their touch, a brush against my thoughts, cold and vast, like diving into an ocean abyss. It whispered promises of forbidden knowledge, truths that would shatter a healthy mind. I blinked hard, staggering back. The wall was solid again, ordinary, but my head throbbed with an echo, a lingering pressure that made sleep impossible for days. After that night, the vanishings began. It started with Mr. Petrov. One morning, his bed was empty, sheets neatly tucked as if he'd never been there. No alarms triggered, no doors forced. The security footage was chilling. At 3:17 a.m., he rose silently, shuffled to that blank wall in the common room, and stepped forward. His body stretched impossibly thin, like taffy pulled taut, before dissolving into the plaster. Fading pixels on the screen, then gone. The facility hushed it up. "He wandered off," the director told his family. "We're cooperating with police." But there were no footprints in the dew outside, no sightings on the perimeter cams. Then Mrs. Klein, same footage, wheelchair abandoned, her form merging with the wall like smoke into fog. More transfers to specialized care, the memos read. Families placated with vague updates. But I knew the truth. The elder ones weren't just watching, they were collecting, drawing in those whose minds were porous enough to cross over. I confided in a coworker, Jake, the orderly. "We have to tell someone," I whispered in the break room. He laughed nervously. "Sam, it's stress. You're seeing patterns where there are none." But his eyes darted away, and the next week, he requested a transfer out. The final straw came during a blackout. Thunder roared outside as I patrolled alone. The void wing was silent. Too silent. I found the remaining residents lined up before the wall, their eyes glazed with ecstasy. Mrs. Harlan turned to me, her voice steady. "Join us, Sam. The barriers are thinning for you too. Feel it?" I did. The pressure behind my eyes had grown, a constant ache. As the wall rippled again, stronger this time, I saw them fully. The elder ones, vast and uncaring, their whispers flooding my mind with visions of cosmic indifference. Worlds born and dying in blinks, humanity a fleeting speck. I fled that night, resignation scribbled on a napkin left on the director's desk. Months later, in my quiet apartment, far from Willow Creek, I still feel it. The slow accumulation we all face as years pile on. The quiet erosion of barriers. Doctors call it aging, but I know better. One day, the plaques will build in all of us. The veils will tear, and they will be waiting, whispering from the void. If you wish to stare longer into the void, subscribe. We will listen together again.